event will provide Tejano points, passport points. The code will be posted on the chat at the end of the session. We will also be posting some other important links in the chat, so please keep an eye out. This session will be recorded so that we may come back to it later and so that others who have missed out will be able to come and watch it. Today's Tejano virtual event is dealing with depression with the Emergence Health Network, and it will be presented by Mr. Chavarria. So now at this time, please mute your mics for the best sound experience. Otherwise, the feedback could interfere with information that we will be sharing today. Without further ado, I will hand it over to our presenter. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for having me here today. I wanted to make sure and kind of tailor today's programming to really focus on this topic that was requested, which is the topic of depression. So today, what I want to do, if anything, the goal will be to kind of go over what, depression and the impact of that is for those individuals that are maybe having some of those challenges. I want to also talk about what are some of the opportunities or access to some of the resources that are available here in our community, so that if we have somebody in our life that we care for, that we love, we can possibly help them connect if they're willing to, right? Because that's really where the challenge can be sometimes. And lastly, I want to talk about some opportunities for you as a participant if you want to find out more information, or if you want to equip yourself with some tools for you to feel more confident when helping somebody. I will also put that on here, and then we can maybe have a conversation about how do we get access to these tools and how can I register and all that stuff. The truth is, we're going to have about 15 minutes that we'll be talking about some of these things, and sometimes it's not enough, and we come out of these sessions thinking, man, I wish I had a little more time. I wish I had a little bit more material or had the opportunity to practice, right? And so I kind of want to talk about that and maybe give people an opportunity to do that if they want to. So like I mentioned, I had a request to come out here and talk about mental health, specifically and focusing on depression. I've been very fortunate to be part of the local mental health authority, which is Emergence Health Network here for the county of El Paso for some time now, actually about 9 years now. And I had the privilege to start my experience with working for a specific unit called Assertive Community Treatment. And in this clinic, we serve in El Paso the toughest consumers in the area. And what I mean toughest is the type of clientele that we would serve in this clinic had real challenges, and their illness was really impacting their life to the point that it was so severe they needed everything, to include placement, housing, to include physical primary care services, to include behavioral health services, all kinds of things. These cases were so intense that by law, me as a clinician, I could only have 10 people in my case. That's how intense this was, right? And so I remember, and the reason I'm sharing the story is because at the beginning of my journey, working with this type of clientele, some of the stuff that I was expecting to encounter was things that I kind of, saw in my academic journey as an undergraduate and now as a graduate student. But it was everything that we saw on our textbooks and on our practicums, things like that, and truly nothing prepares you for what you get to see out in the field until you go out there and do it for yourself, right? And so I remember specifically working with this one client who was diagnosed with major depressive disorder with psychotic symptoms. And this person had been receiving services for many, many years at Emergence Health Network. And so I got the case. I came out there to a very rural area of El Paso where resources were very limited. And nothing really prepared me for the things that I was about to encounter or experience. I'm talking about an individual that, due to their clinical and severe clinical depression, um, they were not able to function in many of the things that I would say typical functioning looks like. For example, um, if you tell me, hey, does major depression cause somebody to uh, you know, lose their hygiene? I would tell you absolutely, especially on a severe level. This person, not only would they not shower or take care of their teeth or clean their hair or things like that, they were to the point where it didn't matter. They would just kind of, you know, use the bathroom in their bed, do things that were really severe and could increase infection, things like that, that you think, whoa, like, does it really impact people in that way? I'm gonna tell you, yeah, it really does. A couple other things was uh, this person had already kind of given up on taking care of their physique and hygiene and taking care of their going and following up with their primary care physician. So there was a lot of issues with infections. Um, and lastly, I kind of think about their support in relationships. Man, because of these issues, a lot of family and people that care for this person kind of were no longer present. They gave up on them. They were exhausted or just not willing to be involved in these type of situations because they had little ones or loved ones that they just didn't want to expose to this type of thing. And so um, I could tell you, based on the stuff that I had experienced in my academic, years and undergraduate, and then finally getting out there to work with somebody that had this type of challenge, like unique, you know, I'm talking about, it was impacting their life in every level. It was eye opening. So I kind of want to spend some time today and kind of piggyback on that story and talk about mental health from that perspective. Okay, so with that in mind, let's quickly address what are mental disorders, mental illness. Because I feel like every time we talk about this, sometimes it gets confused with mental challenges, right? So when we discuss mental challenges, we're talking about situations that could become a problem, but really they are part of the human experience. And so I really think about um, you know the pandemic and what occurred in the past 2 years, and now that we're kind of coming off of that, for many mental challenges appeared. Mental challenges were something that people were dealing with, and sometimes they didn't really know how to deal with. Sometimes they were surprised by the fact that some of these issues were causing some challenges. And I could tell you, many people to this day are struggling with that, with the idea of, before they maybe didn't experience a level of anxiety like they do today. But after the pandemic, because of any environmental factor or issue, they are now feeling a little more anxious than before, or they have identified that. Nonetheless, they can still function, they can still carry out their relationships, they can carry out daily activities. And so this is kind of what I'm talking about. Those are challenges, part of the human experience. Sometimes they can be difficult to deal with, and you need support, you need some help sometimes, but they are not mental illness. That is not mental disorders, right? What we're talking about here is really um, things that affect an individual's way of thinking, state of emotional behavior. It really affects their behavior in general. And I always think about impact. I always think about how is this um, really causing an individual to not be able to carry out their work, be productive, right? For some, it's being in school. How does this affect an individual to carry out their daily activities? And mainly, we focus in the behavioral health field on two specific daily activities, which is sleep and eating. If you don't do those two things, trust me, you're going to have some problems after a couple of days, especially after a week, right? And really, how does this interfere with an individual's ability to carry out relationships, maintain their support systems, be part of society, right? So we look at all of these things, and we start to look at how does this affected individuals' way of life. And so, who are some of those individuals who could diagnose? Well, here in El Paso, some of the local professionals include psychiatrists, psychologists, and believe it or not, our licensed professional counselors can diagnose, and some of the licensed social workers can provide a diagnosis if necessary. So just so you know, and get familiar with that. Also, to include some of the most common diagnoses of disorders that you've heard of. Of course, today we're talking about major depression, right? But there are more than that. And actually, major depression is not the most common disorder in the United States. Currently, the most common, as you might guess, happens to be anxiety disorder. So you'll see those number one, and then you're going to see the major depression, and the rest will follow, which will be like eating disorders, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, and of course, substance use disorder, something that you will see as you kind of spend some time working with a population that has these type of challenges. Okay, so that's kind of what we're talking about here. So before I go to this next slide, I wonder if I could get some participation here on the chat. Let's say that we have a room of 25 participants. Okay, based on the data that we are given by the CDC, and this is data from 2019, early 2020, so not including that pandemic, right? But based on that data, if you have a room of 25 individuals, how many do you think will have a mental diagnosis, a mental illness? What do you think? Put it on the chat here in the room of 25. Okay, Ms. Patricia here. She said 5 question mark. Oh, let's see. I got some other folks that, yeah, I got 10 here. Nice. All right. Let me get one more answer. Let's see before we get to the next slide. See if I get somebody else. 12. Okay, that's quite a bit. I like that you guys are sharing that. I appreciate you. So let's get to that one. So in a room of 25, it's likely that 5 people, Ms. Patricia here, she was right. She probably participated in a mental health first aid course, so it's kind of cheating, but it's okay. She is familiar with this type of material. So what we have here is what 5 out of the 25, right? So it's unique data. Obviously, this includes all, right? Anxiety disorders, major depression, bipolar disorder, and so on. But it is interesting, that this is something that we're seeing, and more people are asking for help. Regardless, there is still today, and believe it or not, a lot of gaps in treatment when it comes to this situation. And so the data that you saw just now, the 5 out of the 25, that is really of those individuals that had the support system and really took that step to say, hey, you know what? I want to get some help. Hey, you know what? I want to get some treatment and get better, right? So that's only for the folks that actually reached out. The data that's provided to us is that more than 40% of people with these type of disorders did not seek treatment, right? So there's a lot of people that we still not being able to support and provide help, and that's unfortunate because I think about those individuals. I think about that client that I shared the story about earlier, and those individuals are also people. Those individuals have dreams, goals, and expectations, and it is our job as clinicians to help them achieve that. Find ways to help them find success or happiness. So that's something that we're really interested in. So here are some of the gaps in treatment, and this is true here to include our community. The truth is, mental health, physical health, insurance, that costs money, right? And sometimes it's difficult for people to have access to funding to be able to cover these costs, to cover the cost of medication, to cover the cost of a copay or an appointment, things of that nature. So we're aware of that, and more we try to put on programming that may be supported by a grant from the state or maybe supported by monies that where individuals that have not the same access to means like everybody, they can reach out and get some help. Um, Obviously, stigma is something that is still big when it comes to the mental wellness, mental health, just mental illness in general. That topic it still carries a lot of stigma. To include that in our community, our community in El Paso is predominantly Hispanic, Latino community, right? Spanish speaking, and a lot of times these type of topics, people tend to avoid. They rather deal with it in their own way, in a way that is more appropriate to their culture, to their community. Many times you'll see, the abuse of substances like alcohol. That is something that is appropriate, and people in our community do all the time, right? If I'm feeling depressed, if I'm feeling sadness, am I gonna go talk to my therapist, or am I gonna go and maybe just get some alcohol and deal with it on my own, right? Not share it to anybody. There's a couple of things to that, right? I think there's the stigma and the cultural stigma of like, um, hey, la ropa sucia se lava en casa, right? Which is don't air out your dirty laundry. But it's also the other one of like, well, what's more accepted? Me having some alcohol and dealing with it, not talking to anybody, or me reaching out for help and understanding, what, I know my limits. I need to speak to a professional about this. Sometimes it is a guidance that I'm seeking. And so I think that's something that as clinicians and also as community members, as students, something that if you're familiar with these things, it's likely that you could help somebody navigate those type of challenges when they encounter them. So keep that in mind. Culture really drives a lot of that. Of course, logistics, when it comes to access to a clinic, my goodness, we don't have as many, and that's every city, every community. Here in El Paso, we're fortunate that our teams travel, that our teams go around the city, but even then, we don't have enough people to be out there all the time. We do have clinics that are strategically placed to serve communities in different types, in different areas of the city, like our east side, our west side, and central clinic. But like I said, even then, if you have somebody that's part of the Tornillo, Clint, San Elizario community, it's difficult for them to drive to the nearest clinic, which just happens to be on Lee Trevino and Traywood. It's quite a bit of a drive, and if they don't have transportation, that'd be really difficult. And of course, lastly is the awareness, and that's kind of something that we're working on here today, right? Is creating this awareness of what is available, what can I do for somebody that might be experiencing the major depression, and what are some of the risks, some of the signs, and what can I do? How can I help my loved one, right? How can I help my peer, somebody that I care for? So I'm glad that we're doing this and we're talking about this. So I kind of want to dive in a little bit here on the topic of depressive disorders. Of course, this is something that, like I mentioned, only clinicians can diagnose, and they really do follow the DSM-5, the new version, to determine some of these parameters, timeframes, frequency, duration, that helps us identify, okay, how is somebody experiencing a challenge, or is this something that is considered already a disorder, right? So one of the things that you'll see here is depression is sad or low mood that persists for at least 2 weeks, right? And so we're talking about duration, we're talking about frequency here. It's something that, of course, it's a mood disorder. So a lot of the times people might get confused and say, well, I'm depressed. But like I mentioned, some of these things happen to be part of the human experience, right? It's what helps us connect with others. It's what helps us empathize with those that are going through a hard time. Um, so it, in a way, sometimes I have conversations with people say, hey, you know what? How can these feelings of sadness be constructive? And in a way, that's how, it helps us really connect. But this here, we're talking about it's getting in the way of somebody's life, right? To the point that they can be productive, to the point that they can't carry out their daily relationships, their daily activities, right? So let's talk about some of the risk factors. We'll talk about protective factors right now. How can we counter some of these, right? But if there is a history of trauma, it's always going to put an individual at risk here for you know being diagnosed with depressive disorders. If there is a family history, so now we're talking about the biopsychosocial approach, right? If somebody is inherited, traits from somebody who is diagnosed with major depressive disorder, yeah, this is definitely going to put that individual at risk. We're talking about, you know, um, how some of the neurotransmitters in the brain, how they're firing, what kind of neuroreceptors, um, are inhibited, what are kind of receptors that are stimulated, all of that stuff. If that's something you're inheriting, of course, you're going to put you at risk, right? Previous episodes, gender, and gender, I'm cautious to talk about because, yeah, we do have data that mainly uh, women are the ones that are predominantly diagnosed with major depressive disorder. But I would say it's because they're the ones that are strong enough to really take that step and seek help. Sometimes in the male community, this is something that might be happening, but we don't have data on because they're not reaching out. And it's unfortunate because guess what? When we look at uh, crises, when we look at those individuals that actually died by suicide, it's mainly men, right? And for the majority of the time, men are the ones that are at higher risk. So there's a correlation there, right? Um, Sensitivity, social circumstances, medical conditions, or medications. Of course, if somebody is diagnosed with a terminal illness uh, or something like that, it's something that's going to put that individual at risk. So I think about the risk factors, but I'm curious to have you participate here on the chat. Let's stay positive here, y'all. What do you think? What are some of the things that we can do and put some protective factors here so that we can protect somebody if they possibly are at risk of developing a disorder like this, right? What are some of the things that could be in place that might put somebody in a situation where they feel protective, right? So we have some of the risk here. Okay, so I want to ask them if they're depressed. So what I like about that is, I'll tell you, many times people may have an idea, a hunch. They might see some signs and have some awareness of what's happening, but they never said anything because they're like, well, I didn't want to get in their business. Well, I didn't want to, I didn't want to like, be rude or anything like that. But I'll tell you, it's very important that if you have somebody that you care and love to start to create that dynamic of communication and say, hey, I'm just here. I'm just worried about you. I care about you. How are you feeling? Like, can you tell me a little bit about that? I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to have a conversation with you and hopefully support you. Yeah, absolutely. Some people are born here. Sometimes you just gotta listen, right? So somebody put on the chat, maybe there's an opportunity to recommend uh, some kind of treatment. I think, let me see if I could get to that. Encourage care. Somebody put that as well. I love that. Let me see. Uh, Give them our company. I love that too. From everybody, even those individuals that were in that unit I was sharing, they're tough cases, right? Nobody who took steps towards recovery. I'm telling you, nobody just got better with medication and and therapy. Okay, it truly was a holistic approach to include those things. Trust me, that was in place, but there was other things that really helped, and one of those things was always having a support system. And what I'm talking about is, what is this individual doing after they leave these type of clinical sessions, right? Like, if they once they leave the therapy, once they leave their psychiatrist, what are they doing at home? And if they have a support system that is helping them win every day at home, it's likely that they're going to get better. So having a support system is huge. Apologies, guys. Somebody's knocking on my door, but they'll be gone here shortly. Okay. What else? Seeking therapy. Of course, therapy is really something that is it's a discovery process. You got to find the appropriate therapist that's going to work for you. But professional help is what we're talking about here, right? Where am I going to go? Find the professional help that works best for you. Okay. It could be, and we'll talk about professional help here shortly. Uh, be patient, understanding. Absolutely. If you're their support system, hey, be patient, take your time. Uh, don't rush a conversation. Don't be pushy and try to get to it in a short period of time. Let them go through the work. That's really where growth happens. When you help somebody get to that aha moment that they realize, oh, this is kind of why this is happening, rather than us giving them the answer, right? The growth happens with them finding out what is the challenge. So I like all of this stuff that you're putting on here in regards to protective factors. The truth is, there's many protective factors that sometimes we don't talk about, but they do exist, especially in our culture, right? So we know that we have to have the support. We already talked about a trusted adult. We already talked about trusted peers, right? But what about a mentor, right? Having a mentor, having somebody that could provide you with some guidance that is outside of the clinical space, that could be very, very powerful and useful. Uh, Another thing that is important is, well, you know, what about spiritual strengths, right? In our community, for many, that plays a huge role, in having that spiritual background, having a spiritual strength. It don't have to be religion. It could be something else that helps them connect to something that's much bigger than them and gives them purpose and gives them the motivation to carry out this type of work. Um, Somebody put an alternative path can take not a professional will be finding a positive outlet such as art, music, writing, self-care in a creative form. Absolutely, those things make people feel like, hey, you know what? I have a purpose. I have something to achieve. And so I think about all of those things, and I'm thankful that you guys participated on here. But now let's talk about these things, right? I love that you put all of these, right? But how would we work with somebody as that initial client that I talked to you about, right? Where somebody that they really are having a hard time finding a reason for living. They're really having a hard time even to take care of themselves and to possibly ask them, hey, you know what? Let's do some art. Let's do some music. What do you like? Sometimes it's even just such a far-fetched concept for them. I was like, no, I don't want to do none of that. I don't even want to talk to you, Luis, and you're here, almost at that point. So I kind of want to share that because it's important to also give us realistic expectations as peers and as loved ones and say, hey, okay, I understand. Like sometimes it's gonna be so hard, and we just gotta find a way to keep working. How do we focus on those very small little wins so that we can start building momentum? And sometimes it's as simple as, hey, you know what? Today we're not gonna do all of the stuff that we mentioned today. The only thing that I want to do with you is I want to meet with you at 9. Let's start easy at 9 a.m. Let's get out of bed, okay? And all we're gonna do is make sure to get you a warm shower. Can we do that? And start from there. We start building these little wins, and it's gonna take time, but eventually we keep showing up and we keep supporting our loved ones um, with the help of professionals. It's likely that they can too find recovery. Trust me, I've seen it. Okay, so there is hope for everybody. Of course, somebody put here volunteering for animal shelter and schools can provide a great sense of purpose. Yeah, I love that too. Like having that opportunity to receive to work on gratitude, to work on spirituality, giving back, a community. That always helps. And I think about those individuals, not that type of client that I was sharing, they really would struggle with that still. But maybe what about those that are not in that space, that they are diagnosed with depressive disorders, but not at that level. That is, it's a lower level of care, and they're pretty much can function in society, but they need a little help. I think that would be fantastic. I've seen it too. I know there's some clients that really take advantage of that. Now, before I move on from this slide, I do want to talk about some of the crises associated with this type of stuff. Obviously, uh, it's unfortunate, right? Because some of these two crises that we see on here um, can have some impact in an individual's ability to kind of share, that to their loved ones. Many times it's a discovery process. Therapists, clinicians, and even family members unfortunately find out, and sometimes it may be too late. And so we always have to be on the lookout for these type of things, right? But the first one we're talking about is, of course, non-suicidal self-injury, and what that is an individual that is hurting themselves, right? An individual that may be possibly cutting themselves, burning, pulling their hair, hitting themselves, uh, maybe throwing up, things like that, using substances. Um, all of that would qualify, right? And so I want to urge you, if you have a loved one that's around you and you identify some of these things, don't ignore it, okay? I encourage you to say something, to say, hey, I love you. I'm worried about you. Here's something that I saw. Do you want to talk about this? Or is there any way that I can help? I can help you go with a professional. I'll go with you. But that's really important, guys. I tell you, if I may overshare again a little bit, I remember on my first year I was working as a clinician, I had identified something on a client. And unfortunately, that was my first time meeting them. I didn't really have a good rapport or relationship with them. So, and also where I had identified this issue, um, it was a female client. She was a female client, and what I had seen was she was sitting with me and she moved in a way where her long skirt kind of moved, and I had seen it. It was in her leg, and because I didn't have the report and I didn't want to make her uncomfortable, I chose not to say anything. Well, I'll tell you, I stayed up all night just thinking about this person. And so the next day, the first thing I did was I went back and asked these questions. And I said, hey, listen, I just couldn't let that go. I want to make sure you're safe. And so from there, we built a good relationship afterwards. But it can be challenging. I'll tell you, it can be challenging. But if it comes from a place of care and love, I think you have a great outcome. Okay. I have something here volunteering. Okay. Yeah, so she was cutting. She was cutting her leg. She had a few cuts there, and so I had to say something about it. And obviously, um, at the end, it was good. It worked out. And even then, if I was not her person, I was going to involve somebody who she trusted more than me, and hopefully we could help her connect. Of course, the other thing that's a risk here for individuals that have this type of challenge is suicidal thoughts and suicidal behaviors, right? Um, it's something that is very common and something that we have to be prepared to. How do we deal with this? How do we work with this? Today I'm not able to carry out that preparation for you because it takes some time, it takes some practice. So I will refer you to the mental health first aid program. So if that's something that you're interested in, hey, we're offering it for free. Participate, and we'll definitely get you all sorted out. But know that this is something that, hey, if somebody is diagnosed with major depression, it's likely that sometimes they may have these type of suicidal thoughts and behaviors. Okay, but I don't want to end this light with the negative. I want to end with the positive, and knowing that, hey, these challenges, many do have a positive outcome if they choose to seek treatment. If they choose to put in the work, they can get better. So there is hope for many. Okay, just want to leave you at that. So again, when we look at this type of disorder, we're always looking at the frequency. So pretty much, how often is this happening? We're looking at duration, for how long is this happening, and then impact, right? We talk about those three areas, which would be how much is it affecting daily activities, how much is it affecting relationships, how much is it affecting productivity. After considering all that, then we're looking at those disorders, and we're likely gonna um, provide treatment, right? So that's kind of how we find out when is this causing some real issues. When is it too much? And we have to involve a professional, right? So, in regards to professionals, there are many. I always say, if you have a better relationship with your primary care physician, go there, right? You have a relationship, You could talk to them. You've been going with them for many, many years. Hey, they might refer you to somebody that they trust, and that's important. Creating this connection with those that want to see you win. That's important. But the truth is, I work for Emergence Health Network, and I am a believer of the work that we do. But nonetheless, wellness you can find in many places. It doesn't have to be Emergence Health Network. And so there are a number of professionals out there, that could accommodate to your unique needs, or the unique needs of your loved one or the person you care about. So advanced protectional psychologists, social workers, there are professionals at EPCC that could potentially guide you. You might have a better relationship with those professionals. Seek out their help, right? Counselors, therapists. Of course, when things do get hard and somebody is having thoughts of suicide, maybe thoughts of hurting themselves or others, maybe reaching out to crisis support specialists, the crisis hotline, possibly the crisis intervention team, which is an officer and a therapist in the same vehicle to respond to really tough calls. That might be an option, for some individuals. Of course, there are those that have the challenge of, hey, I have not only the disorder of, I'm living with major depression, but I'm also living with substance use disorder. And I have a really hard time with that. So there are those professionals that specialize in that, know that that does exist. And many times the treatment is a co-occurring type of treatment, right? It's something that they'll work at the same time. So know that that does exist. Lastly, something that I really like is our certified peer specialists. These are individuals that have a diagnosis. They may be that this individual has a diagnosis, has been living with major depression for many, many years, and has found a way to recover. They have found a way to get better, and now they are helping others find their own path, right? And so I love that because that means that they can talk and have a voice within this type of community, right? Uh, Sometimes we have a certified peer specialist that has that type of challenge. They recovered, but guess what? They're part of a unique community. Maybe they're part of the veterans community. Maybe they're part of the LGBTQ plus community, right? So that's something that we find very, very valuable. Of course, in regards to treatment, there's many, many things that exist. There are some things that are not listed here, and they're part of they're a culturally appropriate type of treatment. Some people like that kind of natural, holistic way of doing things. And hey, like I said, wellness, you can find it in many, many places. But here's some of the stuff that we promote because we're kind of tied up to the clinical space. We're looking at evidence-based practices that show evidence that they work. And so individual therapy is very, very useful. Family therapy, like I said, to promote and create that level of support that is needed for somebody to maintain recovery. Um, Group therapy is very, very useful, especially in a space where somebody feels like they're the only ones going through this type of challenge and they realize, whoa, there are a number of individuals that sometimes they have it even worse than me. And I'm kind of grateful now to know them and get their support and be there for them as well. That could be useful. Medication. I know there's people that are very hesitant on the idea of utilizing medication, but I'll tell you, medication's not for everybody, right? You have the opportunity to choose. Some individuals don't. Unfortunately, they get in trouble, and either the court or their treatment in the jails, they are pretty much set. You have to participate. But for the most part, anybody who seeks treatment can choose what they want and what they don't, right? And so medication sometimes is the right place to start. I'll tell you, with that client that I described earlier, medication was the thing that allowed us to work. It was the thing that allowed us to find some baseline where we could start working because without it, it was very, very challenging. Okay. And then all kinds of rehabilitation programs that do exist. Um, Let me see what else we got going on here. So that'll be treatment. Of course, like some of these clinical things are not for everybody. People are not ready. We already talked about that. That 40% of individuals that said, I don't want treatment, I don't want medication, I don't want professional help. All right. Somebody mentioned on the chat, hey, what about self-care, right? And so I think about self-care as a unique, um, complex way of empowering ourselves to provide some protective factors. And the truth is, self-care is multifactorial. A lot of the times, people think it's just either emotional or physical, but the truth is, there are 8 components on here that many times we forget to explore, and they truly provide us the strengths needed for us to encounter this unique human experience we're all going through right now, right? So I kind of want to give you a little bit of these, right? In regards to intellectual, of course, many people find the strength in using intellectual self-care by, reading, maybe enjoying their favorite podcasts, anything that challenges them to learn a new skill. A lot of the times, that's something that people really enjoy, and is self-care for them, right? Emotional, of course, having somebody where you can share, where you could cry to, where you could be okay and be in a safe space to do so. That on itself is self-care, emotional. Environmental, well, I'll tell you, some people, like my boss, he has his office where it's, in my mind, I'm like, man, it's messy up in here, right? But for him, it's very, very organized, and that really gives him peace, right? And helps him be productive. So even though we have different opinion on what environmental self-care is, the truth is you got to find what works best for you. For me, it's having an organized office. Everything has a place, right? So it just depends, but find what works for you. For many, it's like getting out of the office, going outside, taking a break. If you're in class, getting a break real quick, going outside, getting some fresh air, getting some sun, and coming back inside, and you're feeling recharged. Physical, of course, eating healthy, getting outside, walking, um, you know, doing a little bit of exercise if you can, something that is not stress you out too much. Self care is not the idea of like, oh my God, I gotta participate in self care now. I don't even have the time. That's not self care. That's stressing you out. Self care is just part of what you do. You enjoy it. Okay. It's not a stressor. Of course, spiritual, whatever works for people. For many, it is being part of a congregation, maybe going to church, communicating with their pastor. Depends on your culture. For some, it's as simple as going for a run and experiencing this connection, spiritual connection with nature. I'll take that too. That could be very helpful. Now we're getting to some here that you might think are not self-care, but trust me, they definitely qualify. Financial, what does that do look like? Well, I think about individuals that might have some challenges paying their bill. Of course, it's going to be a stressor, right? But if you find a way to, adjust your finances to the point you really got to worry about that, how much does that help you? That peace of mind, a lot, right? So make sure you're mindful of this stuff. You set up your finances to be successful and win, right? Community, that's important, and I think it's a concept that has gotten lost in the past decade or 2 decades, where people nowadays don't want to even talk to the neighbors. It's like, I know my neighbor, but I just say hello and then close the garage door. That's not it, right? Like, how do we participate in a way where we take care of one another? That we know, hey, you know what? My neighbor here, they fell off a ladder, they got injured, but I'm gonna help them out. I'm gonna take out the trash for them, because I'm gonna contribute, and I want that, same kind of treatment if it already happened to me. Hopefully, create a sense of community here. And lastly, occupational. It's very important, y'all, to find a space where you can kind of go about carrying out your career, um, getting your ends meet, and getting paid, and also being in a space where you enjoy what you do, that you go out there and you're like, man, I feel like I have a purpose, and I feel like, it's not a toxic environment. All of that stuff's important. So occupational, that's what we're talking about here. So these are all things that promote these protective factors that are very important for somebody to get better. Okay, so as we wrap up today's module, I kind of, like I said at the beginning, I don't have a lot of time to talk about skills and practice, but I do want to invite you, if that's something that you're interested in. Currently, we do offer the mental health first aid program, the adult and the mental health first aid adults helping the youth. at no cost. Okay, if that's something that interests you, you could definitely shoot me an email. I'm gonna put my email here on the chat. You can shoot me an email. Um, and we will set you up. Right now we have them at no cost. It's something that you're more than welcome to sign up, and we'll get you sorted. The cost is really the price of the manual, the price of the participant processing guide, and the instructor. But right now it's taken care of by the state of Texas. So if that's something that you want to participate, there is TEA credit associated with it. If that's something that you're seeking as well, we can set you up with that. And of course there's other classes that much like the mental health first aid program do have a certification associated with it, like the suicide prevention class. I know that we do offer that. It's about an hour or two. And so that's something you're interested in, please let me know. We also have other classes that we just put on that help people feel more confident and prepared. Specifically, if you are looking to get into the first responder space, become a firefighter, a police officer, or even a nurse, you might need the CPR class, the BLS class. We're offering that depending on the situation you're in. It may be that we could cover the cost of your card, and so be on the lookout for that. If that's something that interests you, please reach out. Let me know. We'll help you coordinate that. We do have them every quarter, typically open to the community. So that's something that might interest you. I want to empower you, especially if you're a student and you're looking to get ahead of the game, be participate in these type of programs, get some knowledge, and as you go through your programming, this is something that I'm interested in supporting you. Okay, and so that's kind of what we got going on there. Of course, I talked a lot about what we have going on, but you can find more information on all our websites, emergencehealthnetwork.org. My training page there is getting revamped, so it's going to look much better. You can contact us there and send us an email or register. And then obviously all our social media accounts. There's always stuff going on, events, the classes that we offer, things like that. You're more than welcome to participate in that area. Okay. Lastly, I want to leave you with this. Okay, if you do have a loved one that might be struggling with something and there's an opportunity for them to talk to a professional and they want to do it in a way where it's through phone, um, you can call 988 and it'll redirect you to the local mental health authority in the area, which is Emergence Health Network, and they can have a conversation with a specialist and guide them to connect them to the appropriate help. Okay, if things do get worse, if things get bad, and for whatever reason you feel like, hey, you know what, I might not be safe, maybe other people are not safe, call 911, but see if you can request a crisis intervention team. Like I said, that's the officer with the therapist. They go out there, they dispatch in the same vehicle, and they'll do their best to find an option for that individual that does not require them to go to jail or a hospital. Okay, they'll try their best to to connect them or find a solution. Sometimes it is a psychiatric hospital, unfortunately, but at least that person did not get hurt. We're trying to reduce the risk of somebody getting hurt or officers using force. So consider that, and they take their time. Okay, so if that's something that happens or that you need, please reach out. 911 is the best way to get a CIT team to get dispatched, okay, a crisis specialist team. So you will reach out to 911 and say, hey, it's a mental crisis. Can I get a CIT team out here? And then that's how you will get access to them. Okay. But nonetheless, the 988 hotline, or even if you want to try the local number, 779-1800 is a place to call in case you need that kind of support. Okay. Again, that's all I have for you today. Really briefly talking about um, so how does one get on the CAT team? Oh, that's a good question. If you have a passion for this, I'll tell you, a lot of the teammates there have already prior experience working as caseworkers or therapists in our organization. Typically, they require an individual in that part of the team to have 1 or 2 years of experience. That'll be our teammates. On the side of the officers, they are certified officers that have taken multiple hours of training and have years of experience to be able to deal with these type of calls because they're not easy and they require a lot of patience, time, empathy, all of that stuff. And so for them, it's a little different. They have to be um, assigned by the sheriff or by the commander or their lieutenant, whoever they responded to. So, but if you are a behavioral health, if you're seeking to be a professional who is uh, in the behavioral health field and you're looking to contribute in this space, please take a look at our employment page on our website, emergencehealthnetwork.org. Sometimes they're looking to expand those teams. I don't know if they're fully staffed now, but they do a really good job of taking care of the teammates, and so they have a really close knit group there. So please be on the lookout for that. Typically, you need to be credentialed as a qualified mental health professional by the state, work for a year or two, and then you'll be ready to go and contribute. Okay, so I hope that helps. But other than that, like I mentioned, that's all I have for you today on this wonderful Friday. Please take care of yourself. If you can, do something nice for somebody. Trust me, that little thing goes a long way. Just like, hey, give them a compliment. Okay, that's all you need to do. But I'm thankful to be here with you. Please, like I said, keep the positivity out there going. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chavira. Before we let everyone go, I would like to take a moment to, first of all, thank our presenter for a wonderful presentation today. Lots of very valuable information in there. I'd like to thank everyone for coming in and sharing their Friday afternoon with us. I hope y'all enjoyed the session. So we're done with Tohono virtual events for today. However, we will be back on December 1st. We won't be here next week due to Thanksgiving, but on December 1st, we'll be back at the 11 o'clock Happy Math Hour. We will be having Math 1314. We'll be going over basic matrix operations and inverses in Math 1324, basic concepts of probability, permutations, and combinations. For the 1 o'clock session, we'll be going over the Learning Express with the EPCC libraries. We want to wish y'all all a happy holidays and hope you have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.